order. Roll call, please.
Bowie,
Here.
Coleman,
Here.
Johnson,
Here.
Jost,
Here.
Kim, Naker,
Here.
Yang.
Here.
6 present, 1 absent, that being Commissioner Kim. Discussion item number 1, Resolution 25-1725, resolution approving an administrative amendment to the budget for tax increment financing plan for the Osceola Park Tax Increment Financing District, a housing district, and approving an HRA budget amendment. District 9, Ward 2.
Alrighty, thank you. For the next couple of items, we have been briefed on them. We've received staff reports, and so I'm going to hand it over to Director McMahon to see if there's anything to add for the items.
Yep, so last year the HRA unanimously approved similar actions for 3 different TIF plans, providing technical changes that align expenditures to match the projected use of funds, which then helps ensure accuracy in our reporting that we do annually. We have Jenny Wolf here with some additional information and able to answer any questions that any of you may have.
Thank you, Director McMahon. Welcome, Ms. Wolf.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Johnson and Commissioners. I'm Jenny Wolf with PED. As mentioned by Interim Director McMahon, these next 2 items pertain to technical changes to our adopted TIF plans for housing TIF districts, and these TIF districts were created in 2002 and 2003. The first item that Thea had called out is for the Osceola Park TIF district. It's located at 260 South Osceola Avenue in Ward 2. The creation of the housing TIF district resulted in the new construction of 87 senior rental housing units, and the HRA issued a pay-as-you-go TIF note to the developer for the project. Pay-as-you-go obligations are limited obligations without any scheduled payments, and the revenues are first used to pay interest and then to retire principal. The HRA makes no representation to the developer that the pledged increments will be sufficient to pay principal and interest. The TIF plan budget was prepared and approved based on the projected tax increments to be generated in the TIF district. The district expires in 2028, so just a few more years here, and we are projecting that we will pay out more interest than what was budgeted when the district was established. The increase is $160,000. Many factors impact the amount of tax increments actually collected by the HRA, including the taxable market value of the project and the applicable tax rate. The actual tax increment collections have not matched the projected tax increment collections, or projected tax increments. So we have prepared the attached second amendment to the TIF plan to increase the interest payments and reduce the principal amount reimbursed. The second amendment does not increase the total estimated tax increment expenditures. The HRA's budget is similarly amended to align with the amended TIF plan budget. And I'll just say that HRA for TIF plan budgets, these are multi-year budgets, and they're acted on and in place when the district is first established. The budget change is a technical change and does not impact the housing project or the pledged tax increments, and solely amends the HRA budget specific to the TIF district to align with the proposed amended TIF plan budget.
And Ms. Wolf, I received a couple of just inquiries from folks I think that are watching, and so I'm gonna ask you to simplify that in terms of a couple of things that I think would be really helpful for folks that may be tuning in to understand this item and just why it's a technical change. Is there the projections lower or higher than what we've received? And also, if you could, just in simplistic terms, for these next 2 items, share the action that the body is taking in about as simplistic terms as you can get.
Oh, Chair Johnson and Commissioners. I'll preface this comment with just, we have an obligation, a pay-as-you-go note that we issued that requires us to send 90% of the tax increments that we receive. The note holder doesn't care if we call them principal or we call them interest. We have to send those tax increments. The fact that the interest has been paid out higher than what was expected is because just of the timing of the tax increments, and the interest has to be paid first before we reduce principal. So yes, the projected increments are lower than what we've collected, but it's not any impact on the ability for for the note to stay in place. We're required to amend our budget so that we can align with our actual spending. If we don't amend our budget, then we will overspend interest, and that could be flagged by the state auditor for our TIF district.
Okay, thank you so much for that. I think it's just really helpful for folks to make the distinction whenever we're making a decision regarding TIF. Council President.
Thanks,
Sorry,
Chair.
Commissioner Naker.
Thanks, Chair. I really appreciate you asking for the plain language version, because I do think there's a lot of attention on TIF right now, and I think this is an important example. So just to make sure I also understand, there's no more tax increment being allocated to this project than was originally. It's just that the amount of tax increment, the 90% of the increment that is going to the developer, more of it is going to have to go to interest than we thought because the district has underperformed. And none of that money is going to other TIF districts, or, you know, we are not making up the shortfall in any way. It's just an accounting change from saying that some of it, more of it is going to be principal versus more of it is going to be interest for the same amount.
Yeah, Chair Johnson, Commissioner Naker, the language we include that I included in the board report, and that is included in all of our pay-as-you-go note obligations, is that this is a limited pledge to what we collect. We will send you what we collect, and if you end up not getting all that you thought you would get for principal, there is no recourse. No other source is pledged to this obligation. And I think there's many factors of why the tax increments haven't come in as originally expected. Just, I would say, I looked at the TIF plan projections, and mostly it's the market value. The market value just never attained what was expected. And then one of the impacts of late, it's not really the main driver, but the impact of late is the change to 4D. So that was a legislative change that we had no control over, and that reduced our tax increments for a project that's 100% affordable by 60%. So I feel like we might have more of these coming with that change, but we keep an eye on our budgets and what we're paying out so that we can align the two.
So
Go ahead, Commissioner.
to follow up on that, thanks, Chair. In the case where a tax increment district underperforms, that sounds bad, but what it really means is that we got the development while putting less public subsidy into it, and more is falling on the private developer to pay for.
Chair Johnson, Commissioner Naker. So to me, underperforming, it's a projection. It was done 20 years ago, and it's based on a lot of assumptions of what the project will be valued at, what the tax rates will be, and whether the collections will be timely, because time matters as well. If a district, for example, they are allowed to petition their value, and if they petition their value and the county withholds tax increment from us, we won't have that to pay, and the interest on that amount will continue to accrue. So there's many factors involved, but no, we're not paying anything more out than what we're obligated to pay out. There's not any additional mechanism that we're asking for here. We're just asking to continue to align our budget with what the note obligates us to do, which is to continue to send 90% of the pledged increments.
Yes, and I think to the clarity piece of that, it's like not that it's less subsidy going into it, but more that it's the subsidy that we're obligated to do is going towards interest instead of principal.
Well, or, I mean, I guess put another way, I want to make sure I understand this. If a building costs $100 to build, and we say that over time, you know, we will dedicate all of the tax increment to that, 90% of the tax increment to that building, and we expect that tax increment will be $50, right? So $50 in TIF and $50 from the private side. The building gets built, and the taxable value isn't as high as we thought. So instead of $50 coming in tax increment, $20 comes in, right? Then $20 is coming in from tax increment, and $80 is being covered by the private side because we're not on the hook for the shortfall, right? I guess I'm I'm trying to say, like, underperforming sounds bad, but what actually happened is that the building got built. We're allocating the tax increment we said we would to it, but that number is lower than we thought it would be, and the developer has to make up the gap. And so in some ways, not that we want underperforming or overperforming, but I think it's important for people to know that that's, in some ways, that means that there's less public support of this building, and more of it is being fronted, is being supported by the private side, and we still got the benefit of the building and the affordable housing, and when this district closes, all of the additional taxable market value that it has generated. Is that?
Chair Johnson, Commissioner Naker, maybe I'll summarize it in this manner. I mean, there are only, like I said, 3 years left. 2028 is the final year. Had this district performed as projected, we would have paid out all 90% at the end of 2028, and there would be no principal left due on that note. Yep. Right now, we're going to pay out still 90% of what we collected, but it will not retire all the principal because we've had to pay more of it out in interest.
And the developer will have to cover that.
Well, yes. If they have a loan with the bank still outstanding, they have to pay the bank. Yes.
Yep, I think that, that's really helpful just to have that conversation, especially because it applies to these two. My one question that I did have was around just do we typically do these numbers like at the 20-year mark? Some of these, for both this one and our next item, being that they were originally done in 2002 and 2003, just for my own awareness, when we go back through numbers and provide just administrative amendments like this, do they typically happen when we're getting ready to be close to closing out the TIF district?
Chair Johnson, Commissioners, I evaluate where we are on our spending budgets every year when we file our reports with the state auditor. So I keep a tab on how much each budget is performing with actuals, budget to actuals. And I note if one appears to be, getting closer to the actuals, and then look at why, and then evaluate and project through the end of the TIF district. And that's what I've done on these two, projected through the end of the TIF district to make sure that the amendment covers everything what I expect to have happen by the end.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. Any other questions from any of the commissioners on this item? Okay, seeing none, thank you, Ms. Wolf. I will take a motion from Commissioner Naker to approve. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
6 in favor, none opposed. The resolution is adopted. Item number 2, Resolution 25-1726, resolution approving an administrative amendment to the budget for tax increment financing plan for the Housing Tax Increment Financing District Number 3, Shepherd Davern Senior Rental Housing District, and approving an HRA budget amendment, District 15, Ward 3.
Thank you so much. And Director McMahon and Ms. Wolf, this mirrors the previous request in nature, but could you just quick summarize for some of the main changes here? And I know you mentioned the increase from in the previous amendment, so if you could do that here too as well, we'd appreciate it.
Sure, Chair Johnson, Commissioners. This is similar. It was a senior housing project. 120 units were created. The address is 1745 Graham Avenue in Ward 3. And the increase to the interest budget is $160,000 in this case.
So identical. Yes, so thank you for that. Are there any questions or further things that need to be clarified on this item? Okay, seeing none, I'll take a motion from Vice Chair Jost to approve. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
6 in favor, none opposed. The resolution is adopted. Item number 3, Resolution 25-1749, approving and authorizing the CDBG loan extension for Ramsey Hill Apartments, District 8, Ward 1.
Okay, we received a staff report that was an introduction to Ramsey Hill last Housing and Redevelopment Authority meeting. I'll hand it over to Director McMahon if there's anything in particular that you want to say about this item. Otherwise, this is the action that's in front of us today.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, as a reminder, this item extends the CDBG loan term through the end of 2031 and also extends the affordability terms through that period as well. Staff is available if there's any additional questions you have that have come up since last week's presentation.
Okay, seeing none, I'll take a motion from Commissioner Bowie to approve. Any discussion? All of those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
6 in favor, none opposed. The resolution is adopted. Staff report 25-244, Introduction to Amendment to Temporary TIF Spending Plan Authority.
Okay, so for background, so this item actually is coming before us, an introduction. It will vary from our typical introduction to action simply because this will come back before you on December 3rd. I share that now because, believe it or not, we are, next week is our last meeting of November, and then we'll be heading into approving the budget on the 3rd as well. So there'll be quite a bit to get through, but this is one item that'll come before us. And at that time, for that particular meeting, Vice Chair Jost will be chairing the meeting, and that will be when we'll actually vote on the spending plan changes, but this is just an introduction to outline what those are for. So I'll hand it back over to Director McMahon, and I believe Ms. Wolf is joining us yet again, so as our TIF extraordinaire.
Thank you, Chair, Commissioners, and thank you for noting yes. So the City Council will hold the public hearing on this item, and the HRA will take action on this item on December 3rd. This item is a response to state law changes this past legislative session that extend a deadline for using transferred increment, as well as authorizes the use of interest earned on that transferred increment. And we have our TIF guru, Ms. Jenny Wolf, here with more information.
Welcome back, Ms. Wolf.
Good afternoon, Chair Johnson and Commissioners. So as you both introduced, action in 3 weeks, and this is to address changes made at the legislature this past session here for our temporary TIF authority. So I do have a slide here about the purpose regarding the legislative amendments to extend the spending and to authorize the use of interest earnings. The HRA Board is required to amend our spending plan under the Temporary TIF Act to utilize these legislative amendments. The interest earnings must be used within the same limitations under the original Temporary TIF Act, which requires private development that includes substantial rehabilitation or new construction of buildings, creates or retains jobs in the state, including construction jobs, and commences construction by the end of December 31, 2026, as amended, and would not have commenced by this date without the assistance. I will quickly cover the background because I know many of you were not here in 2022 when we were presented with the opportunity to adopt a spending plan under the Temporary TIF Authority. So that was done by the 2021 legislature, and they authorized TIF authorities to expend unobligated tax increments to advance private development, and in that case, the construction had to start by the end of this year. And the tax increments needed to be transferred out of each TIF district into a separate spending plan account by the end of 2022. The adopted spending plan identified 6 proposed categories for the spending authority as follows: installation of required infrastructure serving a specific area on the West Side Flats, private development of HRA-owned sites, private development of underutilized privately owned sites, private development of commercial properties for the purpose of preventing displacement of emerging and small businesses, private development of all types of housing production and private facilities serving unsheltered populations, and private development demonstrating substantial job impacts, as well as any other private development that meets the statutory requirements and for which the HRA documents its findings at the time of approval. So the HRA transferred $27,549,047 to the spending plan account by December 31st, 2022. In 2022 through 2024, the HRA Board authorized 10 projects to spend the full amount that we transferred. These projects are shown in the table here with the dollar amount authorized, and I will highlight each one on the next few slides. So one project was approved to include the installation of required infrastructure serving a specific area on the West Side Flats to advance new housing. The photos shown here are the construction of a new sewer lift station, as well as 2 housing projects that were able to advance and commence construction and complete construction because of the temporary TIF funding. This is the Essex House with 221 units and Harbor Line with 63 affordable units. 2 projects included private development of underutilized privately owned sites. The photos here include United Village construction of buildings, which include 2 new restaurants as well as a new 80,000 square foot office and a 160 room hotel, and the construction of the new Xcel Energy Service Center at the Heights. That was able to advance and commence construction because of the temporary TIF funding for the required infrastructure. 2 projects included private development of underutilized privately owned sites and commercial properties for the purpose of preventing displacement of emerging and small businesses. The photos here include Little Africa Plaza on Snelling Avenue, which includes a new grocery store and new offices for AEDS, as well as the Molly Center on Front Avenue, which includes a gym and a health-focused business hub developed by Tyrone Miner, owner of the Fit Lab, which business was displaced from their prior location. And last but not least, we had 5 projects that included private development of all types of housing production and private facilities serving unsheltered populations. The list is here with Listening House, with the new daytime drop-in service center serving the unsheltered, Habitat for Humanity's Phase 1 development at the Heights, which included 73 ownership units, which the first unit is about to sell next week, I think. The conversion of the Landmark Towers office portion, resulting in 187 new housing units. 892 East 7th Street project developed by PPL with 60 units of affordable rental housing, and 652 Sherburne, which included substantial rehabilitation of HRA property to preserve 6 units of 30% AMI rental housing. The photos are here shown on the following slide. So here we have a photo from the Habitat for Humanity development and the Listening House project, and photos of 652 Sherburne, 892 East 7th, and the Landmark Towers. So that's background on the spending plan that we've already done. Are there any questions on that before I go on to the amendment? Okay. So the spending plan will be amended and restated to identify the specific approved expenditures, those that I just reviewed, those 10 projects, authorize the expenditure of interest earnings on funds held in the spending plan account for authorized uses, which includes the same spending categories that I identified as well, extend the deadline for spending funds, including the transferred tax increments and interest thereon until December 31st, 2026, and will increase the total spending to $29,049,047, which is an increase of $1.5 million, which results from the interest earnings. This amount is an estimate, and the HRA will be limited to spend the actual interest earned. The required approvals for the amended and restated spending plan includes action of the HRA Board and City Council, as has been mentioned before, with a public hearing at the City Council, and these actions are planned for December 3rd. And the actions must occur in December if we want to extend the spending deadline and authorize interest earnings for spending. Just a quick note, the approvals on December 3rd will not obligate any of the interest earnings, and future action of the HRA Board will be required to advance any new project. The interest earnings are tax increments. The amended and restated spending plan provides the HRA the opportunity to utilize the additional funding. Any interest earnings remaining in our spending plan account on December 31, 2026 will be transferred back to one or more TIF districts.
And thank you, Ms. Wolf. We do have a question from Commissioner Nager.
Thanks, Chair. Just going back to the previous slide, actually, Ms. Wolf, you mentioned that we would be increasing the total spending to $29 million, which is an increase of $1.5 million. How much of that has already been spent?
$27,549,047 is what's been obligated and contractually be spent. We haven't sent all of that out the door yet, but it's all obligated under contracts.
Okay, so the extension of the deadline for a year only gives us 1.5 million more, and the ability to use interest. All that we're talking about is.
Yeah, Chair Johnson, Commissioner Naker, it's only for interest to projects, yes. But some of the projects that we have approved might really appreciate a little more time to spend the dollars. The projects all commenced already, and they're working on them, but they're just having trouble getting the draw request in and are getting the money out the door by the end of December, just because of timing and all of that. But they're all actively going on. So yes, it would be new spending of the interest earnings up to $1.5 million.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Naker. And I appreciate the clarity as well. I think that just kind of going into the broader scheme, so much of this was already kind of obligated, but then the remaining amount, but I guess to that vein, do we anticipate any sort of unaccounted for interest in the next year or so, in addition to that 1.5 million, or is the 1.5 million pretty set on what the
Chair
final number
Johnson,
will be?
Commissioners, that is our upper boundary. I was advised that this probably is our one-shot chance at amending it. And
Sure.
so I had asked if I could wait till, a few months into next year and see where we are, but it was suggested that we go ahead and just budget high for this purpose.
Okay. And to clarify, we would, just so for everybody's awareness, we would have to make an action on this before the end of the year, because they are originally set right now to not be in alignment with what the state change is, which would be to expire at the end of the year. So if we didn't do that, we wouldn't be able to carry it into next year for that year extension without this body acting.
Chair Johnson, correct. Yep.
Okay. I'm not sure if you have additional slides or if that was your last one.
Oh, no, that was my last one.
Okay.
Yep.
Any additional questions on this item? Yeah, Commissioner Bruley.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Johnson. Thank you so much, Jenny. I had a chance to talk with the PED staff and just get a briefing of this. As you know, there's a lot of noise, right, around just like what TIF is and what isn't. So I do appreciate this refresher and just continuing just kind of the questions I had in the last meeting, particularly around, how is it like, where is like the clear like indicator, I guess, of like how we're seeing like where the pool of money particularly of like all different TIF districts, how it can be transferred out. Because I remember last time you mentioned that even though the project is to completion, that TIF pool is still open and can be used to fund additional affordable housing projects. I guess my question is like there's not like a clarity around like how we see where like when the pool is, I guess, when the money is pulled, where does it go, right? Because I feel like we're able to see like the source, of everything, but this one just kind of seems like it's like a cloud, of funds. So if you could speak to just like how like OFS or if that's PED, like how that sourcing of funds of the additional pooling of money. And I know that's kind of complicated, but I'm just trying to just get my
Yeah,
feelings
Chair Johnson, Commissioner Bowie. First, I'll start with just say this presentation that I just gave was on temporary TIF authority. It is not something that is always available. It was an ability to pool unobligated tax increments into a single spending plan account, and then we were able to then spend from that account. That is not the typical pooling that we've been speaking about affordable housing. So when we pool from a tax increment district, the funds stay in that TIF district, and we identify them as available for affordable housing. And then what happens is when we have projects that are looking for funding, we look to see how much do we have from each TIF district, and then we pool that for the project, but it stays in that TIF district. So that TIF district cash balance has those dollars. They don't get transferred and they don't get pooled. They get pooled to spend on a project, but they don't leave the TIF district account. This temporary authority was special and it required us to move the money out of the TIF districts, but that's not typical.
Thank you. And I think if I was to sum it up, it's kind of like TIF districts are like credit cards, right? And once you have like limits, your limit gets to increase, you have more access, you can pull from that different accounts. And I don't know if that's a good description, but I'm just trying to come up with, analogies that just make sense.
Chair Johnson and Commissioner Bowie, I'll just say that our policy and practice has been to maximize pooling for affordable housing to the greatest extent that we can with all of our TIF districts. So we're always keeping an eye on what pooling abilities we have. And that's, we have our internal resource team within PED, and that's where we kind of keep track of where the dollars are. And I think the presentation I gave last fall, I gave a highlight of how much money we had pooled, and right now I believe we have about $5 million that's pooled for affordable housing for decisions made by this body. That money doesn't go anywhere until this body approves it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from commissioners on this item? Otherwise, it'll be back for a public hearing on December 3rd with the action at that time. Okay. Before we adjourn today, I just wanted to take the time to share with my colleagues some of the information that was shared with me today, and also to thank Director Intagna and his team for their work surrounding the Emergency Rental Assistance and Eviction Prevention Program. We are open for applications as of today, which is exciting. And as a reminder for people who are noticing it, this was a program that was really established to try and to assist low-income rental households in St. Paul from having to face an eviction on their record. We know the implications of that, and this allows for that 14-day intent eviction notice to suffice in order to qualify for additional funding. And this is something that I'm really excited about. Each household could qualify for up to $2,500 to cover their late rent and associated fees. As the council member as the chair, but as the council member whose ward has 55106, and you've heard me say multiple times that it has some of the highest eviction rates in the county, and as we're heading into what will soon be winter, my LA reminded me that winter is in December, although it feels like winter is here sometimes in November and comes early. We have a real opportunity, I think, here at the city to stand in and disrupt the continued impact of folks going into the pipeline in the beginning by also being able to invest in eviction prevention work here. So it's been a long time coming. If you ask me, there's been a lot of work that has went through it, but we do have an open application process on the website, just stpaul.gov//ERA. And people are able to reach out at this time. And so I'll be sure to send that out to commissioners too, so you will have that. But overall, just the applications will be processed in the order that they come. Sharing with community partners will be really important as well. For if you hear of anything, I just know that some of us have received direct emails from folks that have been looking for this assistance. And so as a reminder, we invested $1 million this year, and we're really working to continue to invest that resource into next year as an eligible use of local affordable housing aid. But genuinely really excited to see that is up and back here at the city, because we have to talk about housing on all the full spectrum, including keeping people in their house once they have it. And so that's just something that I was really excited about and couldn't let go without telling you that we have flyers for it. So we'll be able to share that with you. Multiple organizations have been also shared the information by the wonderful PED team and PED staff that have been working to set this up since the beginning of the year. As you know, we've been working really hard to get that together, despite all of the things that this year has thrown at us. And so just to be able to see that the program is still launching in lieu of, the cyber attack, in lieu of all of the things that we have received in order to try and get it just in time to keep people in their homes for additional time periods during some of the coldest months, the holiday season, and in all the times where you do not want to have to deal with having an eviction on your record, and we know the barriers that can hold. It's citywide. There are restrictions on on income, but it is not related to a specific geography. So if they live in the city, this is something that any of us can refer people to and utilize. just wanted to share that because I've been waiting. So I'm really excited about that. And I think that in many ways, we look forward to partnering with staff to get as many people through that process as possible. And if you have any additional questions, not to volunteer staff, but we have a wonderful housing director and director of PED. Feel free to reach out if you have any additional questions or you need the flyer sent to you. With that, I'm happy to give you back time. We are adjourned.